Hello YouTubers, welcome back to another Tesla electric car video with me, Adam Informed. If you didn't see my video last week, our family road trip from Leicester to Whitby was a success and we arrived with 61% charge remaining. If I convert that to a somewhat understandable metric for the everyday person, based on the journey there, the driving consumption worked out to a real world range of roughly 222 miles for my 2021 Tesla Model 3 SR Plus. So with a rough vehicle range of 222 miles and the nearest supercharger just 75 miles away, the whole trip is going to be a piece of cake, right? Well, with the limited rapid and level 2 charging facilities around Whitby, that preferred Tesla supercharger is actually going to be 150 miles away because we need to take into account the round trip. And theoretically, with 75 miles utilised already, 75 miles earmarked for the return, we have 72 miles worth of wriggle room over the 4 days. This is where it's going to get a little bit sticky because I need to run some errands in that time, and with the amateur mistakes that I made, I actually lost part of the 72 miles for which made for some unnecessary squeaky bum time. And if that phrase is not universally recognised, it essentially means that the circumstances were a little bit more tense and nervous than it needed to be. Pretty much how I feel now for using that phrase in the first place. So if you're going on a road trip in your Tesla Model 3 or Model Y in the near future, you definitely want to take note of my mistakes just so you don't unnecessarily eat into your vehicle's range. Plus, how much did the 370 mile round trip cost in 2022, and did the return trip go to plan, or was a detour required? So if you're interested in how the cheapest and lowest range Tesla Model 3 performed in a typical family road trip on a route with limited supercharging capabilities, you've come to the right place. In the meantime, I'd appreciate it if you give the video a cheeky like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you are interested in Tesla and EV content weekly, hit that notification bell so you are the first to know when a video goes live. Right, Adam, let's assess your amateur mistakes then. So to briefly recall the figures upon arrival again, we arrived with 61% state of charge and we have travelled on 177 miles so far. Over the weekend, the car will be used for a few more miles just for local errands, but in particular, we're going to drive back out inland and over the moors to a lovely rural pub where I took this photo. But on day one, I messed up pretty badly too. Straight up, one thing you should consider when trying your best to preserve range is to understand your Tesla is always on, because it's managing the battery systems to keep it in its optimum shape, and that's for a number of nerdy reasons which we're not going to go into today. Therefore, to maneuver it into the best state for retaining that state of charge is going to ensure your Tesla can go to sleep with ease. Now, the car's official manual stipulates it can use around 1% of charge per day, just being completely idle. And whilst it's a good figure to work around, the reality is that I've actually seen less than 1% per day over the course of a week. So then your next question is going to be, well, how do you send your Tesla Model 3 to sleep? And thankfully, it's going to be much easier than putting your kids to sleep. And as parents know how tricky that can be at times. In fact, all you need to do is to lock your car like normal, and it should do it all of its own accord, just like a screensaver for your Mac or PC, and for the same energy saving purposes too. No manual processes are required, the car just does it of its own accord. However, there are some processes that strictly prevent the car from sleeping, or it forces it to wake up unnecessarily. Some of these processes you may know and some you may not, and that could make all the difference for your state of charge and your own journey requirements. If you are a Tesla owner, you probably already know that Sentry Mode utilizes a fair bit of charge. Day to day, many drivers prefer the security advantages than to disregard the few percentage points of charge for that mighty benefit of having security footage. With the cameras surveilling 24/7, the Tesla Model 3 is then very much awake to fulfill such a task 24/7. Now, you can turn this off either in the car or remotely from the comfort of the Tesla smartphone app. However, having rocked up to Whitby at around 3:30 in the afternoon, if I didn't spontaneously check the Tesla phone app before I actually went to bed around 11 o'clock, I wouldn't have realised that I had actually used over 4%, and then I had a remaining range of 57% for the courtesy of that Sentry Mode. Now, that was 4% of unintended battery usage over 8 hours. Those that have seen some of my previous videos earlier in the year will have known that I've suffered my fair bit of external third-party damage to my car already, and because of that, I am a big fan of Sentry Mode. It definitely has its place within the car. Knowing in advance that Sentry Mode would use the battery unnecessarily, on this occasion I wanted to prioritise the battery life rather than security here, so I actually thought I had turned Sentry Mode off within the car as I left, but apparently not. So whilst it was not the end of the world, I did actually lose 4% of battery unintentionally. Therefore, if you need to preserve your battery, do check your phone to ensure that the Sentry Mode is indeed turned off, if that was your intention at least. But you should also note that checking the app also wakes the car, so use that sparingly too, or your app usage will then become your own worst enemy. Another internal process that can prevent the car sleeping is the use of cabin heat protection, and again the system remains on or it will wake up at intervals to ensure that cabin temperatures are within set limits. If not, it will kickstart the AC automatically, making the car run them cooling systems to achieve the desired outcome. Again, you can turn this off in the car or via the smartphone app. The third and final process that could prevent your Tesla sleeping to preserve battery is not something that was unique to me. However, that process is the running of third-party connected functions. So a common example of this discrepancy is Octopus Energy's intelligent tariff. This can actually prevent the car from sleeping at times, as it assesses if a charger is plugged in, just so it knows when to start charging at the time sensitive cheaper rate that it does offer as part of that tariff. Now, I've read somewhere that this is actually going to be fixed at some point, but it's worth knowing now until that very point. In addition to this, there are other third-party connected apps, in particular with any sort of stat-related services that monitor the car's fundamentals, such as the battery temperature or the battery health, etc. They can also prevent the car from sleeping, as it's receiving a constant stream of real-time data requests. So my advice before you do the same as me is, as soon as you're parked up, check the Tesla app when it's locked to ensure that the Sentry and cabin protection is off, and I mean that this is solely for when you're in that charge/range retention mindset. And finally, ensure that there are no potentially connected apps during this time. So now you know how I messed up and what you shouldn't do when prioritizing the battery for your next road trip. Let's move on to the journey to see how much juice and the wiggle room that I had for that journey home. After our lovely weekend in Whitby, the night before we were due home, and I inputted our battery percentage into a better route planner, and it didn't want to send me back to Ferrybridge Superchargers. In fact, it wanted to take me off route to another supercharger, but if I manually overrode that to Ferrybridge, it didn't give me much wiggle room at all. It predicted that we'd reach the supercharger with around 4% remaining. Squeaky bum time indeed. So at the time I was slightly concerned, and I did consider that using the local 7 kilowatts level 2 charger at Audi for an hour or so, as I knew that would add another 7% for a decent buffer. However, I knew I had done this journey back home before, so if I just put my trust in the inbuilt car navigation, it would be more reliable of what was achievable, especially because its most recent software update. Whilst I'd used quite a bit of buffer mileage, I knew I had never run out of charge to date before, so I disregarded the temporary charge idea and just put my full trust in the car to see if the desired Ferrybridge Supercharger was even possible. Even then, I knew I'd always have charging options at the end of the day. It was just less desirable than the one that I sought. Thankfully, after dialing it all in the navigation, my predicted range would be around 11%, and so at that point I knew trusting my gut instinct in hope that the car would outline the right charging decision for me was absolutely the right decision to make. And this is why software and over-the-air updates are becoming such an advantage for vehicles in 2022. The car is consistently getting better, and on this occasion its navigation predictions are even more accurate thanks to a number of variables in the decision making process. And as we head through the scenic moors again, before finally finding the smooth motorways and the dual carriageways, along the way we are achieving some pretty good consumption at around 223 watt hours per mile, so it's looking pretty healthy so far. But how much range do you actually think that I arrived at the supercharger with? Will the navigation be right, or will it be under 10%? So I arrived back on the 11% mark just as predicted, with a monstrous 210 watt hours per mile stint. That's almost 5 miles per kilowatt hour, not forgetting the elevation changes within the moors, the dirty car, and with 4 passengers and luggage. It was a mighty stint if I say so myself, and to echo my previous comments, the car's sat-nav was bang on prediction. This is exactly why you don't need that military-like experience to plan your road trips in a Tesla. Just enter your destination and the car will handle it all. Now, the beauty of not needing that 100% buffer this time means that our charging stop to get home is only going to be just 15 minutes, which gives me enough time to buy some Percy Pigs from M&S Food. That wasn't for the kids, they were actually for us. And I mean, we've got to be good role models for the kids, right? But 15 minutes literally came and went with a combined chance to utilise the loo and walk back to the car. My wife then had the spontaneous idea to attend the East Midlands Designer Outlet on the way home, and being the good husband that I was, I agreed. I knew it was en route and it was just easy motorway driving from here onwards. Charging wasn't going to be required from here to home, even with the stop at the Designer Outlet. If it was somehow miscalculated, there's literally some superchargers actually on site, so having charged at Ferrybridge, we're all gravy right now. So before we conclude with the overall cost and the final consumption figures, we drove down to the East Midlands Designer Outlet and managed to reach our destination with an extra percentage point over the predicted amount at 53%, utilising a consumption rate of 219 watt hours per mile on pure motorway driving. Again, I can't grumble at that. I was really happy with our bargains on site too. We grabbed some trainers and school coats for the kids before slotting that into the front because, well, why not? Then we made the final stint home and we were expecting to arrive home with a nice buffer of 34%, so no more supercharging as initially anticipated. So to conclude, we got home with 32% charge rather than the 34% initially predicted. However, we achieved over 5 miles per kilowatt hour for that very last stint, and this meant that the whole round journey trip we achieved an average consumption of 219 watt hours per mile or 4.56 miles per kilowatt hour. And this was achieved in very much normal conditions. The weather was hot, which was favourable, but the weight from the four of us and the luggage and not using their aero wheel covers, and the car was just plain filthy from the start. I didn't hog the slow lane and I just drove within speed limits where I could to get to our destinations. And so I think that was a completely fair reflection of what is achievable in the Tesla Model 3, noting that this is not the LFP Model 3 that you can buy today. So when it comes to cost, I still have an allocation of free supercharging miles, so I literally only paid for home charging prior to the trip, and that would have cost me up to £3 or $3.55. But to be totally representative in normal day-to-day circumstances, we would have had to have paid 45 pence per kilowatt hour of electric at the Ferrybridge Superchargers. And so we suckled on 29 kilowatt hours of electric on the journey there and 33 kilowatt hours on the way back. And that would have been around £27 for supercharging and £3 for home charging. So £30 or $35.50 all in for 370 miles. That's literally 8 pence a mile. A petrol car achieving 42 miles per gallon will have paid something like £69.70, or on a per mile basis, we're looking at 19 pence per mile. The overall journey went entirely to plan. There were some concerns for the journey home, however the reality was that it wasn't anything to worry about in the end, and despite my stupid mistake of not turning Sentry Mode off, it didn't penalise me enough to ruin my weekend plans. In fact, we did everything we wanted to do without having to charge at Whitby. The supercharging stops we did there and back were flawless. On the way there, we didn't manage to eat our food in time, and on the way back, we literally grabbed our Percy Pigs, went to the loo leisurely, and got back just in time to set off. Our EV family road trip was truly flawless, and this experience is only going to get better year on year. I mentioned in my last video that this supercharger wasn't available when I did this run last year, and now the supercharger is directly en route and has cut my overall journey time. Next year, the year after that, maybe the year after that, the availability of chargers will totally eradicate my charging stop issues because we will only see more and more chargers installed across the country, meaning the trip in theory should get quicker and quicker. If you don't currently drive an EV, let me know what your thoughts were on the journey and where you're concerned that it initially wouldn't go to plan. If you're already an EV driver, what's the furthest journey that you've taken in your EV and how was your experience? Alternatively, if you're not sure what to comment and you want to let me know you got this far in the video, you can simply comment squeaky bum time and I'll give you a cheeky thumbs up for doing so. Seems a little bit bizarre saying that, but if you know, you know. And if you got this far in the video, you definitely know what I'm talking about right now. So don't forget to subscribe, like the video, share it with anyone or any sort of beneficial group that may find the video useful. You guys have been great, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.